Hello again, and it's time for another weekly review. This week we're going to talk about how Karen got on. If you remember, if you watched last week's review, we talked about Karen's training and how she's coming back from a long break. So we're going to see how she got on last week, and also I'm going to talk about how you can use the how you can use our group training plans to train for a sportive, for basically a one-day event like a sportive or a gravel race or a mountain bike marathon or something like that. And well, let's get to it then. So here's the plan we set up last week. If you watched last week's video, you'll be able to you might remember this. And if you remember, we modified the plan to work for Karen, who's coming back after a long break. So we wanted to be a bit careful and make sure she doesn't overdo things. And what we're going to do is review what Karen's done. If you remember, we removed the sessions that weren't associated with power, and also some of the C rides, and we reduced the sessions to half so that Karen didn't overdo it. We should still get a good workout with half the session, but it'll be a bit more balanced. And we left these sessions as they were because she's going to go out and do a club ride on a Saturday, and we moved the run to Sunday so that she's then got an option of either going for another ride, which was planned to be shorter, or a run. So we'll look at what she's done. The last review was on Friday, so we'll look at Friday to Friday because we do our planning on Fridays usually. So what she did was she did the club ride last Friday, and she made comments as she didn't feel amazingly well, and but she got through it, and it felt like it was okay type of sluggishness, not like an illness type of sluggishness. You can see here that she substantially exceeded the training stress score that we'd estimated, and so it was probably quite a hard ride. We can look at all the details here. And looks like she had a bit of a coffee stop or something here. So what you can do is look at the training zones. Karen trains with power, so we can look at the power zones, and you can see that power zone is very variable, but you can see actually that a lot of her powers were round about what we've got a threshold set for. That's this dotted line here, which explains why it was a higher training stress score than we might have estimated, because she was working at sometime in zone 4, sometimes in zone 3. And if we look down, further down, there's probably going to be a graph that shows the training zones. A lot of time in zone 1, which is normal for a long ride, but as you can see here, where we'd normally expect a lot of time in zone 2, some time in 3 and a bit in 4, we've got a fairly even split, which means, and actually some time above the upper end of zone 5, which is like pretty high intensity for Karen, but not given her background, it's not outstandingly surprising. Look at heart rate zones. That's a more normal story for an endurance ride. We might expect this to be a bit less, the tempo time, and this to be a bit more, but in general that's okay, and it means it sort of verifies that she wasn't actually flogging herself to death, because there's not really a huge amount of time in her sort of threshold zone here. The reason this is a bit skewed is because we made sure that we set Karen's FTP, or threshold power, a bit lower than we thought it might be, because we didn't want to risk pushing things too hard early on. It's usually quite good to be a little bit conservative with how high you set the FTP, at least initially, and then gradually build in as the intensity goes up. So that's a good session, and she didn't do anything on Sunday, had a bit of a break, which is quite reasonable after a long ride like that. Monday she did some yoga and stretching, a bit longer than planned, but that's fine. Commuting, and then she did the interval session on Wednesday because she still felt a bit tired on Tuesday, which is probably a consequence of riding a bit harder in the endurance ride on Saturday. So if we look at this, you can see how she got on. She did this on an indoor trainer. And you look at the powers, and she quite comfortably managed the powers, a little bit over the target powers. And if we look at her heart rate, we can see how it worked, and we can see that that was fairly comfortable for her. Normally in a hard interval session like this we'd expect a drift, so the first few intervals would have lower heart rate, peak heart rates, and that would go up, and the recoveries would also go up, but which you can see happening in some of these. Her heart rate's not dropping quite as low in the later efforts here. So what we can say about this workout is that it went pretty well. It's stressing her system a bit, and she's getting used to doing structured work training again, which is really what we want. We don't want things to be too hard. You can have a quick look at cadence to see how she was getting on with cadence, and you can see it was sort of in the 80 to 100, probably more 80 to 90 region. And she did a run here, which was, she'd moved from Thursday, and can have a quick look at this. So running isn't specifically for cycling, but Karen wants to do a bit of running as well, and aerobically it's okay, it's similar, it's good training, and it's really quite a good way of getting a workout in a short space of time if you're a bit pushed for time. So she doesn't have a running power meter, but we can look at her heart rate zones here, and you can see that it was a fairly easy run. Zone 2, a little bit of time in zone 3, so that's fine. Next week's very similar to last week, and you saw us go through the planning process for that in our weekly review last week. So let's look at the plan for this week. What I'm going to talk about is how, if you want to do a one-day event like a sportive or a gravel race or maybe a mountain bike marathon event, how I would adjust the training to work to suit that event. So what you want to do is think about the most important thing. So what do you need? What can you do now, and what do you need to change for when you get to your event? So if it's an event that's longer than you've ever ridden before, then you need to build up your distance, the duration that you can ride for, so that you can complete it. And if it's a distance that you're pretty confident that you can do, then you probably want to work out how to get a bit faster at that event. So the principles aren't particularly different in that you need some harder training and some easier training. So if we look again at the plan, we can identify when you might be able to concentrate on a longer ride that's a bit similar to your event. So what I would do is pick one of these rides, one of your weekend rides, and decide that you're going to develop that ride to be representative of your event. So you can take out the run. I mean, obviously you can do some running if you want to include some running, but you could move it, or you could do it on the day that you don't do your main ride. So here, if I was looking to build up the duration that I could ride, then I would make that ride representative of the, I would say, build endurance during this ride. So you need to make an estimate of how long your ride is going to take. It's better to work with durations because speed isn't that great, isn't that good a thing to work with in cycling, because weather conditions and terrain and all sorts of other factors come into play. So make an estimate of how long it's likely to take you, based on maybe on a sort of typical average speeds that you can ride at. I realise that's slightly contradictory. And start at the duration that you can ride for now. So if you can ride for 2 hours now, you start doing rides of 2 hours, and then add maybe 30 minutes or 15 minutes, or just try and build up the volume of the ride. So if you've got an event coming up in May, for instance, you've got 3 months to build up the duration of your rides to meet that requirement. So if the event's 5 hours, for instance, then you can do 2 hours now. You need to do an hour more each month so that you can then ride 5 hours. Or if you want to ride faster, if you know you can do the duration, then you're trying to build up how fast you can ride. And then, so I would develop this ride, the endurance tempo ride, and make that your main session of the week, because you're going to be spending some time in your training zone 3 and possibly in your training zone 4. And your objective is to get faster. But I wouldn't do the full distance, full duration of your event. Still make an estimate of the duration of your event, but increase the volume of your ride as the weather gets better, and also that can bring along the speed. So if you know you can do the duration, then you don't need to worry about that. So you can start working with the tempo efforts, spending more time in zones 3 and zone 4, maybe on climbs, or where you can make the big difference. If you're looking to do a faster time, then it's more efficient to ride harder on the climbs and recover a bit on the downhills and ride at a sort of medium pace on the flats, because of the wind resistance. The way the wind resistance works, it's beneficial to climb harder and descend easier. So what I would do is build the duration of that ride, but concentrate still on the intensity. Make the intensity the important factor as you build that duration. So what are the other sessions all about? Well, the harder sessions, these interval sessions and your more structured tempo riding, they're developing your threshold power. So what these harder sessions do is they make you faster for a given level of effort, which also means that it makes any given speed easier, and therefore if it's easier, then you can ride for longer at any given speed. And also say your event is hilly, then it means you can ride the hills at a more comfortable pace, which means that ultimately you'll be able to ride further. This 8-minute session helps build your threshold directly, as I explained when I went through the planning last week, and this tempo ride consolidates your ability to ride for long periods of time at a good pace, and also push up your threshold a little bit. And then also working on the principle that the more you do, the better you'll be, which is a reasonable principle as long as you don't go too hard. If you can do more riding, but make sure it's at a low intensity so you're not really just wearing yourself out, then you're going to develop your ability to ride for longer. So that's the review for this week, and if you want to join the group plan, that's great. I'll put a link below, and if you want to follow along with the videos, I'd really love to hear from you and find out what you'd like to learn about. And good luck, have a great week, bye.